Joining me right now in an exclusive Fox Business interview, the new Voice CEO and former presidential candidate, Herman Cain. Herman, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Maria.
Well, let me get right to the breaking news. And, of course, you were tapped by the president to be nominated for a spot on the Federal Reserve Board, but you have pulled your consideration back, declining that. What led to the decision, Herman? Why did you do that?
After I looked at all of the factors involved, which took about a month, and collected all of the information, the straw that broke the camel back was a discussion that I had with two administration staffers who told me all of the things that I could not do if I became a Federal Reserve Board governor. I could not run my business. I could not pursue my business interests, and I had to be non-political. I had to be politically correct in anything I said, or be nonpartisan. That's like taking a racehorse, putting him in the stable, and not letting him run. That just didn't fit with who I am, Maria. That was one of the biggest reasons. And one of the other biggest reasons was that today, as the new Voice CEO, I have maximum flexibility for what I say, when I say it, who I criticize. I can be as partisan as I want to, but if I'm a Federal Reserve Board governor, all of that goes away, and I have very, very, very limited flexibility.
You know,
those were the two main reasons.
And you said, look, this is a big pay cut. Obviously, there's that, and you've been saying that recently. Then your nomination led to this big debate about who should sit on the Federal Reserve Board. Should it be someone who is an ally of President Trump and has business experience like yourself, but no federal, well, you were on a Fed board, by the way, but a lot of people said you brought real activity, real business sense, having run business in the past, so you're giving a practical sense rather than an academic sense on the board. What was your take on the whole debate that ensued as a result of the president naming you?
First of all, I know how to be independent. I understand the independence of the Federal Reserve Board. That wasn't an issue in my mind. It was only an issue in the minds of those who did not like my profile when it came to me being on that board. Secondly, you're absolutely right. Compensation was a factor, but I was going to try to work around the compensation gap if I could continue to pursue my business interests. But when I was told that I couldn't pursue my business interests and we had this compensation gap, that was a real problem. But I understand independence, and I think, and here's one other story out there that some people were talking up, and that is, I'm not qualified. Well, they don't know me, Maria. They haven't looked at my background. They don't know my background goes back where I started out as an analyst. I've done a lot of different things, not counting being on the Federal Reserve Board of Kansas City and being chairman of that board, and they don't count that as experience. They didn't want someone on the board that has a broader view of business and a broader view of the impact of the policies and the things that the Fed would do, because I would have brought that perspective to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. But it didn't happen, and I respect the president for respecting my wishes and withdrawing my name from nomination, because I would rather continue to have this infinite flexibility that I have to be able to tell people the truth and to be a proponent for capitalism and tell people the truth about the dangers of socialism.
Well, the other issue is this comes at a time that the president was and is still pretty much bashing the Federal Reserve, right, Herman? I mean, the president, and he was right, you know, a year at the end of last year, calling the Fed loco and crazy because they were on autopilot, raising rates and winding down the balance sheet. In retrospect, the Federal Reserve did see that they were actually on autopilot, and it was a mistake. So they pivoted and they changed their stance. But the fact that the president was pretty much bashing the Federal Reserve and Jay Powell, and the same time period that nominating you, who is an ally, created room for his detractors to say, you know what, this guy's unqualified. You know what, this is more attempts by the president to undermine the Federal Reserve. Was there a little of that in there?
There was a lot of that in there. They didn't know what they were talking about. Now let's go back to the moves that the Federal Reserve made at the end of last year. We noticed a slowdown in January, February, and early March as a result of those moves. The good thing that the Fed did was that they said for 2019, they are going to be patient. Good. I hope they remain patient. Look at this stock market and what it did yesterday. It is a result of the patience of the Federal Reserve. Now, I would hope that they don't get nervous, and I hope they remain patient for the rest of 2019. And I also hope which is what I was going to bring to the Federal Reserve Board, that they look at some variables other than wage increases to determine whether or not they believe that the economy is overheating. So this year, if they stay with that patience, that is good news. Good news for the market, good news for businesses, good news for profit reports. Going into 2020, I hope they don't get nervous and start doing some things like they did last year in 2019.
And you wrote this in the Journal, last week, basically saying that the Federal Reserve has had all these academics on the Fed board, and the academics are not seeing and actually getting their hands dirty working the way you are, and that's why they've made mistakes. So you think as a result of having all those academics on the Fed, that's why maybe they missed what was going on in the economy at the end of last year and were on autopilot as far as the unwind of the balance sheet and raising rates?
Yes, and as you said earlier, the mere fact that I was being considered has raised the discussion about Fed policy. And the perspective that I don't see on the Fed is that if you change a Fed rate, it impacts all of the banks, and then the banks pass it on to their customers. People who want to make loans, people who have fixed rate loans, people who have variable rate loans. Then businesses determine their business plans based upon the cost of capital, the cost of cash flow. That's the perspective that I would have brought because I have been there. I've seen it from being on corporate boards. I've seen it from being a CEO. And it's just to say, oh, wait a minute, did you consider this? That's how I would have approached the job. And that, I believe, is what motivated the president and Larry Kudlow to consider someone like me because of my extensive and very broad business perspective in terms of making the decisions that the Fed makes.
So what are your feelings now about where we are in the economy and what the Fed's next move should be? If you were on the Federal Reserve Board, what would you be recommending? Staying pat, cutting interest rates? How strong is the economy right now, and what does it need?
I would be recommending that they remain patient. They already made that decision. Don't get nervous. Remain patient for the first 6 months of this year and evaluate the results. We are still on a roll when it comes to the market, prosperity, and growth. Let's see what happens in the first part of the year.
Let's see what happens in the first part of the year, Herman, but also going into 2020, because you've got an economy that a lot of people are questioning just at the time when the economy is most important for the president's reelection. Now we know that former Vice President Joe Biden is expected to announce he's running for president tomorrow. The fundraising battle is heating up. Republican donors who ignored President Trump in 2016 are apparently ready to go all in to get him reelected. He's got a donor backdrop here that is quite strong as he continues raising money. What are your thoughts about the field? You've got Biden coming in, and then you've got Bernie Sanders saying, yeah, anybody should be able to vote if you're American, even if you are a murderer, even if you are the Boston bomber.
You know, Bernie Sanders has been criticized for a lot of things. And I think this thing about letting felons and criminals and bombers vote categorizes him as being purely crazy. That is a crazy idea. Now, as far as Biden coming in, come on in. Join the party. They've got nearly 20 people running. But here's the thing. The Democrats are going to try to get in the noise chamber to try to influence the Fed to raise rates when they may not need to raise rates, because they do not like this prosperity. They do not like the records that the stock market is setting. They do not like that. They don't talk about it, and they don't like it, and they're going to try to put some noise pressure on the Fed at the end of the year.
Herman, great to see you this morning. Thanks so much. Herman Cain.
Same here, Maria.